The throne room of Ethermark had seen 1,000 acts of war, diplomacy, and divine judgment. Its black obsidian floors reflected the torchlight like the surface of a dark sea. Banners of crimson and gold hung from columns so tall the ceiling was lost in shadow. Dragon nobles, warlords, high priests, and ambassadors from 17 conquered realms filled the hall in their finest armor and scaled robes. Not one of them moved. Not one of them breathed. Because the human woman was still standing. Her name was Mara Ellison, and she had walked into the throne room of the Dragon Emperor the same way she walked into every room, without asking permission. She was 53 years old. Her hair was silver gray, pulled back in a practical braid. She wore a worn leather travel coat and mud-flecked boots. She carried no weapon. No sigil. No royal seal. She had simply walked past the outer gates, past the inner ward, past the armored sentinels who had reached for their halberds and then, inexplicably, lowered them. Something in her eyes made men step aside. She had crossed half a continent in 22 days. She had forded the Ashen River during flood season. She had climbed the spine of Drakkar in a snowstorm with nothing but a hand-drawn map and a tin of dried biscuits. She had bribed no one, charmed no one, threatened no one. She had simply kept walking. And now she stood in the center of the most powerful throne room in the known world, surrounded by beings who could level mountains, and she looked around at all of it, the obsidian, the fire-carved pillars, the banners of dominion, and her expression said, smaller than I imagined. Human. The voice came from the throne like a landslide, deep, ancient, vast. You have trespassed upon sacred ground. You will explain yourself or you will burn. Mara looked up. Emperor Draken Seraphic sat upon the throne of ember and bone like a god that had gotten comfortable. He was immense in his half-shifted form, 8 feet of scaled muscle and barely contained power, great obsidian horns curling from his brow, eyes like twin furnaces, wings folded tight against his back like storm clouds waiting to break. He was 700 years old. He had eaten sorcerers for sport. Entire armies had collapsed simply upon hearing his roar. Mara Ellison looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Joe." The throne room went still in a different way than it had been still before. Before, it had been the stillness of suspended violence. Now it was the stillness of confusion. The Emperor's furnace eyes flickered. A muscle in his jaw moved. Something ancient and unreadable passed across his face, a tectonic shift hidden beneath stone. "What did you call me?" he said. His voice was quieter now. That was somehow worse. "Joe," Mara said again, in the same tone she might use to call a child to dinner. "Your real name. The one I gave you." She tilted her head slightly. "You were considerably smaller then." High Warlord Keth Morn, who had served the Emperor for 3 centuries and survived 2 civil wars, slowly turned to look at the dragon beside him. The dragon gave a tiny, helpless shrug. No one spoke. No one knew how to speak. The Emperor rose from his throne. He descended the 17 steps of the Ember Dais, each step carved from the bones of a different god, and he crossed the obsidian floor, and the crowd parted before him like water before a prow, and he stopped. He stopped 3 feet away from Mara Ellison. He looked down at her. She looked up at him. "You shouldn't be here," he said. And for the first time in recorded history, there was something in the Emperor's voice that no court scholar had a word for. Not weakness. Not tenderness, exactly. Something older than both. "You shouldn't have been unreachable for 11 years, Mara said. Not angrily. Factually. The way she had always spoken, direct as a hammer, warm as a hearthstone. "But here we both are. I am Emperor. I know what you are." She said it simply, without dismissal, without awe. "I also know what you were. 15 inches long. Screaming in a burning ruin. Too small to open your own eyes." She met those furnace gaze without flinching. "I was there, Joe. I was the first thing you ever saw. Behind the emperor, one of the younger dragon nobles, a lordling barely 2 centuries old, leaned toward his elder and whispered, "Is the emperor going to kill her?" The elder dragon watched for a moment longer. "I don't think so," he murmured back. He sounded slightly odd. Mara reached into her coat pocket. Every guard in the room tensed. Weapons were half drawn. The air crackled with draconic energy. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was yellowed with age, creased and worn from being opened and folded again many, many times. She held it out. The Emperor, Draken Seraphix, scourge of the Western Kingdoms, breaker of the god chains, stared at that piece of paper. He reached out slowly, with one great scaled hand, and took it. He opened it. Inside was a child's drawing. Clumsy, joyful lines in faded ink. 2 figures, one enormous and winged, all spiky and exuberant. One small and human, with a lopsided smile. Beneath them, in a child's uncertain script, were 2 words. Me and ma'am. The throne room of Ethermark had never been so quiet in its 700-year history. The Emperor did not speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was different. Still vast. Still deep. But something in it had shifted, opened, like a fist slowly releasing. "You kept it," he said. "Of course I kept it," Mara said. "You made it for me. I was 6 years old." "You were 6 years old and already insufferable," she said, "and I kept it anyway. I've kept everything." She paused. "The little clay dragon you made that fell apart. The letter you wrote me before your first campaign. The one you wrote afterward that you thought I didn't know was you pretending everything was fine." She watched him. "I know all your handwriting, Joe. Even when you're lying." Something happened to the Emperor's face then. It was not a thing the court could easily categorize. Scholars would later argue about it. Some said his expression simply changed. Some said they saw, for just a moment, something very old and very young coexist in the same pair of furnace eyes. As if all 700 years and the 6-year-old with the clay dragon were briefly the same creature. He looked at Mara Ellison, and his voice came out rough as gravel. "Why did you come?" "Because you stopped writing," she said. "Because 11 years is too long. Because I am not dead yet and neither are you, and I refuse to let the 2 of us become strangers over a matter of stubbornness and empire." She folded her hands. "And because you are my son, whatever else you are. And I will walk through anything to tell you that to your face." The Emperor was silent. Then he turned. He turned to face his entire court, the warlords, the nobles, the ambassadors, the priests, the generals, all of them frozen and watching with expressions ranging from shock to something that looked dangerously like wonder. And Emperor Draken Seraphix, in a voice that carried to every corner of that vast and ancient hall, said, "That's my mother." No one laughed. No one mocked. No one questioned. Because she had walked through the front gate of the most fortified fortress in the known world with no weapon and no fear. She had crossed half a continent and climbed a mountain and stood in the heart of his power and looked at him like he was still the small, screaming thing she had pulled from rubble 700 years ago. And he had let her. That was all anyone needed to know. He called for quarters to be prepared. He dismissed the court. He walked beside her, not ahead, as they left the throne room, and those who watched swore that his posture was different. Still imperial. But something in the set of his shoulders was looser. Younger. At the doorway, Mara Ellison glanced back at the empty hall one more time. Then she looked up at her son. "Your floors are cold," she said. "And those banners need washing. I can see the dust from here." "Ma'am. I'm just saying." Draken Seraphix, Emperor of the known world, Scourge of the West, Breaker of God chains, made a sound that no court scholar had ever heard from him. It was suspiciously close to a sigh. "Yes," he said. "You're right. and they walked on together.